our meditation. And I invite you to all join me in this meditation as we begin to practice and to really open our consciousness to allow in loving kindness. So to practice loving kindness, I invite you to just begin to sit in a relaxed manner. Just closing your eyes if you feel comfortable, or just finding a spot to gaze at with your eyes open. And I invite you to just take 2 or 3 deep breaths, with just slow, long, and complete exhalations. Just letting go of any concerns or preoccupations as you breathe out. Just feeling or imagining the breath moving through the center of your chest into that area of your heart. And as we continue to breathe, we acknowledge and we know that loving kindness is first practiced towards oneself. Without first practicing loving kindness towards oneself, we often find difficulty with loving others. As we breathe, we feel that loving kindness towards ourselves. And I invite you to join me in saying some silent phrases after I say them, just quietly into yourself. And as you say these phrases, just allow yourself to sink into the intentions that they express. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be peaceful and at ease. Continuing to feel that loving kindness that connects us to the intentions of wishing happiness to ourselves and to others. Allowing feelings of warmth and friendliness and love to arise in both the body and the mind. Connecting to them and allowing them to grow. And as we move into a period of silence, I invite you to also bring to mind a friend or someone in your life who you deeply care for. And as we go into the silence, to slowly repeat the following phrases silently of love and kindness toward them. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. And may you be peaceful and at ease as we move into our period of silence. And as you begin to bring your awareness back to this room, back to this time and space in this present moment, I invite you to once again silently affirm to yourself, may I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be at peaceful and at ease. And to repeat the following loved ones silently, or the following silently for your loved ones. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease. And we breathe into this present moment. And we breathe out. And we say, so it is. Amen. Thanks, y'all. All right, so if anybody's talked to me this morning, you probably realize that I'm being a little less cocky about football today. Martin got me really good before the service. And I will say, though, in my own defense, after last Sunday's service, there were some people, and I will not name you, but that came up to me and said, I'm rooting for the Seahawks also. So I'll let y'all figure that out amongst yourselves. I'm not going to make eye contact with anybody, but, I don't want to give anybody away. But anyway, Madison Jazz Band. Nah, I'm just kidding. We'll root for the Packers. It would be nice to see them go to the Super Bowl. So we'll just leave it at that. All right, so back to Unity stuff. So if you've been around Unity long enough, you are probably aware by now that we use wisdom and quotes and teachings from many different spiritual speakers and teachers. Now, some aren't really even known to be very spiritual, but that doesn't mean that there's not a hidden spiritual message in between, or something that we can interpret. We can look at and kind of start to interpret the spiritual meaning that may be hidden within. Now, tomorrow we honor a very great man. We honor a great leader. We honor a great teacher. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sought to make this world a better place for himself and for all of us that live in it. Inspired by the nonviolent action of Gandhi, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his life for that belief on April 4th, 1968. Now, you may have noticed my stole today. I've had a couple people come up and say, hey, that looks kind of Catholic. But there are some Unity ministers. There are some Unity ministers that wear a stole, and in fact, I've got one that says Unity on it. I usually reserve that for weddings and stuff, but Unity does give you one. But there's a significance behind this specific stole. Now, some of you may be aware, but a lot of you may not realize that there are 3 different paths to becoming a Unity minister. Now, one is what used to be the traditional seminary program at Unity Village. And I say what used to be because they've now moved that program to where it's completely online and students no longer attend that seminary at Unity Village. Now, another is via the field licensing program, and that's where a LUT or a licensed Unity teacher decides that he or she would like to become ordained, and so they complete what's called the field licensing program. Now, the third option is the one that I chose to take, and that was through the Unity Urban Ministerial School. And like the new traditional program, it primarily consists of classes online, some in the field, with a lot of field work in different churches, and travel to Unity Village for licensing and ordination interviews. Now, I bring this up because my school has a very rich history. Unity wasn't always what it is today. We like to think of it, as being, we see this as just being this big, diverse picture, but it wasn't always like that. It's kind of had to progress with the times. And there was a time, like the rest of the country, where not everyone in Unity was offered the same opportunities. There was once a time where people of color were made to sit in separate sections in a Unity church. And becoming a minister for a person of color at Unity was a very difficult path. It wasn't necessarily impossible, but it was a very difficult path. One specific minister, Reverend Ruth Mosley, decided one day enough, and she set out to make a change. She wanted to be able to spread and to teach the message of unity to urban communities and to be able to offer people of color an easier, more fair path to also become Unity ministers. Now, this change led to her starting a new school within Unity, and in 1979, the Unity Urban Ministerial School had its launch. 8 students enrolled, and in 1982, those 8 students graduated and became Unity ministers. Now, Reverend Ruth used to use the model from the colleges she had attended to develop the structure of the urban school, and based the school's mission on the biblical verse of Isaiah 61:1. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, and to proclaim liberty to the captives. So when I graduated from the Unity Urban Ministerial School, I was given this stole in honor of those people that helped pave the way before me. And today I wear this stole to honor those who have brought and continue to bring the good news to the oppressed, to those who seek to bind up the brokenhearted, and to those who proclaim liberty to the captives. Now, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of those people. He may not be with us physically any longer, but he left us with so much and so many rich teachings. One of his quotes, "At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love." At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. Now, it's important to know, and I think most of us probably know, he wasn't talking about romantic love here. He's instead talking more about what the Greeks referred to as something called agape. Now, a definition of agape means understanding and redeeming goodwill for all. It is an overflowing love which is purely spontaneous, unmotivated, groundless, and creative. It is not set in motion by any quality or function of its object. Agape is disinterested love. It is a love to which the individual seeks not their own good, but the good of their neighbor. Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people, or any qualities people possess. It begins by loving others for their sakes. It is an entirely neighbor-regarding concern for others, which discovers the neighbor in every person it meets. Therefore, agape makes no distinction between friends and enemy. It is directed toward both. If one loves an individual merely on account of their friendliness, they love them for the sake of the benefits to be gained by the friendship, rather than for the friend's own sake. Consequently, the best way to assure oneself that love is disinterested is to have love for the enemy neighbor from whom you can expect no good in return, but only sometimes hostility and persecution. Now, Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore defined love as the pure essence of being that binds together the whole human family. Of all the attributes of God, love is undoubtedly the most beautiful. And he also taught love in divine mind is the idea of universal unity. In expression, love is the power that joins and binds in the divine harmony the universe and everything in it. Now, this sounds very similar to that agape love that we mentioned a little while ago, and it sounds like Charles Fillmore may have been referring more to kind of an agape type love. And Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. as well. And while thinking about this talk today, I referred to a book that I've got on my desk titled Ethics for the New Millennium. And you'll soon be hearing more about this because February, you'll hear more about this as we get a little bit closer to February. But February kicks off our season of nonviolence, and this is something that I'll be speaking a little bit about on Sundays during the month of February. But this book also came to mind when thinking about the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. So in the book, he mentions compassion and how compassion is seen as the springboard to love. So it stands to reason that compassion could very well be the springboard that propels us into the center of love. Because where love is, violence begins to diminish. But this doesn't mean that those times when it's easy to love, it's not talking about that. It's no work for me to love those I agree with, right? Or those I get along with. Or those that I just flat out like, if I'm being honest. It's not difficult to love people in those circumstances. And I'm sure most of you out here feel the same. That's easy, but remember the part of the agape definition where it states, love for the enemy neighbor from whom you can expect no good in return, but only hostility and persecution. Now, I kind of say enemy because I don't really view anybody as being our enemy. So we'll just kind of say those people that we don't maybe necessarily get along with. We'll say that as the definition for that. But it's not always easy to love people in those circumstances. It doesn't come so readily, does it? Now, I don't know about you, but love and compassion are probably the last thing I feel towards the person that cuts me off in traffic. Last week, I was turning right onto Monona Drive from Broadway. And I'm sitting there, the light turns red. I'm kind of looking, there's cars coming. I can't turn right on red. Beep! I hear this behind me. And I was like, dude, what's going on? I can't even go. And I look behind me, and he's giving me a little gesture. And let's just say it was not a little wave, like, hello, how are you doing up there? I'm putting this in G in case we have any kids in here. But trust me when I tell you that I was not feeling love for that guy at that time. So let's talk for a moment on what might be able to help us to love, even in those types of circumstances. To love and to feel compassion even when it's not easy, or even when somebody may shoot us a less than friendly gesture. Now, none of us came into this human experience with a manual telling us how to do it right, how to live this human experience. We weren't lying in the hospital nursery as infants hugging a manual instructing us on how to handle every aspect of this human experience. Makes me kind of sad too, because in my former life I was a technical writer. Seems to me I should have been able to have written a manual, but anyway. But one of the ways in which we can begin to love, even when it's not difficult, lies in how we respond, in our response. So think back to that guy in traffic. I could have responded back in like kind. But honestly, what was that going to solve? Other than the fact that I'm a minister and shouldn't be doing that, but it likely wouldn't have solved anything. For one, responding the same probably would have only fueled the fire and giving birth to a whole new level of anger. In anger, no matter how significant or how insignificant we may see the reason for anger, it's often the segue to violence. Now, I remember Mindy and I, we lived in Dallas for about 3 years, and we heard of road rage incidences all the time, where people were literally losing their lives. And why? Why were they doing that? It often lies in the response. And often we only have a split second to think about what our reaction is going to be. A split second to choose how we're going to react at any given time. Maybe sometimes just a split second to decide, to make the decision to choose love. Or sometimes we might have a little bit of time to think about our response. Sometimes it's not in traffic, it's in other situations. We may walk away from a situation in anger, or read an email even, and start to feel a little bit of anger about what it is that we just read. But those situations usually provide us a little bit of time to at least think about how we're going to respond. You can walk away from an email and be like, I'm going to sit on it for a minute. I'm just going to kind of think about how to respond to this. But the result is almost always the same. What is going to happen if we respond in anger? It's very difficult to stay in anger with someone when they've responded back with kindness or with love, isn't it? It makes you begin to take a step back. Now, Charles Fillmore tells us in the Metaphysical Dictionary, every soul that dwells upon the earth is your neighbor or my neighbor. There is no such thing as distance in spirit, nor in the operation of spiritual laws. Through us must the law of divine love bind up and heal wounds, dissolve error, and restore light and order from out of chaos. Now, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. also tells us, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Now, there's a reason why we use something called a flashlight rather than a flash dark. I thought that was kind of funny when I wrote that, but anyway. But there's a reason why we use a flashlight instead of something called a flash dark to find our way through the dark. There would be no point in trying to utilize a tool that provides more darkness to try to see through the darkness. It's not going to help, and it's only going to end up more than likely being useless. It's not going to light up any part of the room, no matter what we do. We'll even say if a flashlight's got dead batteries. We'll say that. It's not going to light up any part of the room. Now, a flashlight, on the other hand, that is a different story. Turn it on and it shines a beam of light. And it cuts its way through the darkness, enabling us to see where it is that we're going through that darkness. And what about in a spiritual sense? Where is it that we derive our light? We draw it from within. And we shine it out when we practice peace, when we practice love, when we do our part to help eradicate violence. King later wrote that Gandhi's teachings were the guiding light of our technique of nonviolent social change. Gandhi never mentioned that we only shine our light when it's easy. Neither did it's a mouthful for me to say. I'm just going to say King for now, no disrespect, but neither did King. In fact, the person next to you may not be at all interested in shining a light, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue to shine yours. It doesn't mean that your light might not be the exact light that will beam upon the right person or the right situation at just the right time. We might even walk into a dark room and not immediately be able to find the flashlight we're looking for. We may know it's there somewhere, but also know that we may have to kind of fumble around through the darkness for it just a little bit. But it doesn't mean that we just give up and that we just stand right where we are in the darkness for fear that we'll trip. It means we search for it even though it's not easy, because it's only through that light where we will be able to find our way safely through the darkness. Now, King also quoted, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." So remember earlier when I mentioned how difficult it is to remain angry or to even become angry at someone who has shown kindness to you? Now, I mentioned driving earlier and things such as road rage. Well, I remember several years ago driving around downtown Austin, and I think it's changed a little bit now because it's grown, but it used to not be nearly as frenetic as Dallas, but it still came with its issues on traffic. But kind of like Madison, there were a lot of one-way streets, especially when you got downtown. But just a lot more of them in Austin with it being a little bit bigger. And it's really easy to get twisted around in downtown Austin, to take a wrong turn onto a one-way street, which I have done before, or to even run stop signs because you're so busy trying to look up to make sure you're heading the right way on the right street. So one time I'm just kind of cruising along, and this car just flies out of nowhere. The man that was driving the car, he ran a stop sign and came very close to just T-boning me in the middle of the intersection. Now, I'm a young guy in my 20s at that point, and I've got that whole tough guy thing going on. You know, it's uncool to take anything off of people, so I immediately I just lay on the horn, I start blaring the horn, and I prepare to wave a few kind gestures of my own. But then I look up, and the guy and we make eye contact with each other, and he waves at me. It wasn't in the way y'all are thinking. It was a real, true wave. It was just kind of a wave of surrender. He waves and he mouths the word, "I'm sorry." And any anger that I felt in that moment disappeared just like that. There was no way I could respond back with anything other than kindness. It would have made me look foolish. And I would have just gone all against my values at that point. I wasn't yet aware of Unity teachings quite then, and I may have been in my 20s and kind of full of this false bravado, but I still remembered my values at that point. So I nodded my head, I waved back, that's okay, and I went on about my day. And I still remember it to this day. That is the impact that had on me in that moment. So remember earlier when I mentioned choice. We always have the freedom to choose what our reaction is going to be at any given time. We can react in anger or any other emotion that doesn't serve our highest good or the highest good of those around me. But is that going to transform an enemy into a friend? Likely not. Or we can react with kindness or with love. That is where true transformation begins to really take place. That is where we begin to do the work. That is where we begin to truly not only read about spiritual principles, but to put them into practice. And when we express true love and kindness toward another, we are expressing God. We are expressing the divine. It's also important to remember that we don't just express love. We are love. So today I make the commitment to honor great teachers and leaders. Teachers and leaders such as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who gave his life for those beliefs and principles in which he felt so strongly. For those beliefs and principles that he knew honored the divine, both within others and within himself. So today I remember at the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. I make the commitment today to honor this statement by saying, at the center of nonviolence, I stand in the principle of love. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. I make the commitment today to be the light that drives out the darkness in every situation. Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. I make the commitment today to be that force, that love that transforms an enemy into my friend. Today, I remember and I commit. Namaste. So in just a moment, we're going to prepare our tithes and offerings, but I